in Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of this earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they shall declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So begins the Declaration of Independence. The causes, the need, were then detailed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. This right and this demand was not to be taken lightly. These words follow. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are far more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Wow. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. The reasons, then, for this action, this necessity, were written out. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. The Declaration of Independence then listed 27 charges against the King of England, and it detailed the efforts that had been made to resolve them in peace. Those efforts having failed, this is the final paragraph of the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And before the signatures of those assembled were taken, these words were added. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Treason! Rebel against a government? Accuse a reigning king of tyranny? Of injustice? Who were these men who dared risk so much? Why would they take such action, one that would put them and all that they held dear at such risk? 25 of the 56 were lawyers or judges. They knew full well what would happen to them legally for such action. Some were pastors and doctors, those entrusted with the human care, compassion for each. 11 were merchants, 9 were farmers, some plantation owners. These were men of significant means, most with much education and all with much to lose. And there was much loss. 5 were captured by the British and brutally tortured as traitors. 4 months after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Richard Stockton, who was a New Jersey State Supreme Court justice, arrived home in Princeton to find that his house had been commandeered by the British and that his family was living as refugees with friends. Himself having been betrayed by a Tory sympathizer, he was pulled from bed one night, beaten and thrown into jail where he almost starved to death. Finally released, he returned home to find out that his estate had been looted, his possessions burned, and his horses stolen. And he had been so badly mistreated in prison that his health was ruined, and he died before the War of Independence was brought to a close. He was not alone in his loss. At least a dozen of those 56 had their homes pillaged and burned. 5 months after the signing, Rhode Island's William Ellery's house was burned, all his property destroyed. John Hart of New Jersey, nicknamed Honest John Hart for a marvelous reputation among the people, had to flee for his life even as his own wife lay dying. Their 13 children also had to flee for their lives. John hid in the woods for a full year before finally returning home to discover that his wife had indeed died, that his children had disappeared, and his fields, his grist mill, his farm, and his stock were completely destroyed. He died shortly thereafter, never having seen any of his family again. 17 of those 56 lost everything they owned. Closer to home, here in Virginia, Carter Braxton, a wealthy planter and trader, loaned 10,000 pounds sterling to Congress to help with the fight for independence. That loan was never repaid, and he had to sell off many of his land holdings in order to satisfy that debt. The rest he poured into outfitting American ships so that they could carry more cargo. Many of those were captured by the British. And by the end of the war, this wealthy man who represented you was bankrupt. Thomas Nelson spent most of his family's fortune to support the American effort. In the spring of 1780, he signed his name to a loan for $2 million to purchase provisions for the French who were coming to the aid of America. Later elected governor of Virginia during the Battle of Yorktown, he ordered George Washington, who was commanding the American troops, to fire on the mansion where General Cornwallis and his troops were quartered. It was a move that helped bring about the conclusion of the war, but destroyed his own home because that's where Cornwallis's quarters were. Nelson later died bankrupt. Thank you. And we're not here today to worship them. The gratitude is certainly due, isn't it? They were willing to risk everything that you might live freely in this country. Most of them never had opportunity to enjoy those freedoms, but we wouldn't be celebrating this weekend if it had not been for the foresight of those men of courage and their willingness to sacrifice for what they believed. Their hope, their efforts, their lives, their fortunes were poured into this country because they realized the absolute necessity of change, and they could see the possibility of a government by the people, for the people, one that could survive only as an educated citizenry took responsibility under God, as James Madison pointed out, saying, "We have staked the future of all our political institutions upon the capacity of mankind for self-government according to what? According to the 10 Commandments that you find written in the Holy Word." Now, that wasn't an understanding of just one leader. George Washington noted that religion and morality are indispensable supports, and he warned, "Let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion." Our country today reflects the truth of his words. We want and expect people to be good, to be kind, to be moral. But without God, there is no basis for a common understanding of what that looks like and why it is so utterly necessary. The kind of society those men, those signers of the Declaration of Independence dreamed of, where all are created equal, where each has a responsibility toward the other for the common good, in which a relationship to God orders lives and actions so that all may live lives of peace, that cannot exist without God. Yet they were willing to risk their lives and fortunes on that hope. Church, we have a far more certain hope in Jesus Christ and in the kingdom of God which he came to bring. It too was a hope looked forward to by heroes of the faith who went before us. Abraham, who did not receive everything promised in this life, but trusted God, believing in that heavenly kingdom to come. We have the hope made certain by the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, by whose blood we are saved, through whose shed blood we are set free, and through whom we can now enter into the kingdom of God, not just later, but right now. A kingdom that is not temporary, but one that will last through eternity. The future that God has planned for us is far more certain than that for which the signers of the Declaration of Independence risked everything. Can we, who have such a glorious hope, do anything less? Think about that. Can we do anything less for a far greater hope? We're not called to sit back and to wait for others to lead. We're called to lead the company of the courageous, those who risk all, that others might have true life, true everlasting life. What would it take for the world to see the hope found only in Jesus Christ through you? What resources might you need to commit to the spreading of that kingdom, to the certainty of that hope? How might you need to educate yourself so that you can express to others that great promise? And what are you willing to risk so that others might have that very best life, not just now, but eternally? What are you willing to risk? You who are called to be the courageous. Today, as we prepare to come to this table, let us recommit all that we have and all that we are to the spreading of this great kingdom, to the one who has given all and to the one who is returning to bring it in its fullness. As we consider what that might look like, I'm going to invite you to sing. Stop. To sing the song, I Surrender All. We're going to use verses 1, 3, and 5. I'm going to ask Andrew to play through that one time, and then we'll join him as he plays. Consider where you are in that relationship with God and what you might have yet to offer. Do you know what to do?